This is one of two videos made in collaboration between the Jason of All Trades and Alexander Dyer. 2 guys, 10 tips. There'll be a link at the end of the video for the rest of the tips. Alright, so here we go. 5 tips for you. Whenever you start a project, you should use a test piece. Get a piece of material that you're going to sew with, whatever that is, and whatever the thickness is or how many layers you might be doing. Do a test strip. So often when you start a project, you're going to change your thread, and if that thread is a little thicker or thinner, then your tension's going to need to change. So things like changing your thread can affect the tension. You might change your needle. You might need to adjust your stitch length. So I might decide after sewing this that no, I want smaller stitches than this. So that gives me the opportunity to sew a little bit, look at it, make a determination about the project ahead as to whether this is the right stitch length for this project or not. Especially when you've changed your thread or you're sewing with a different material, it's good to see how everything reacts to the combination that you have for that project. That way you can get your machine set up before you start on your project and every stitch will look great. That's better. Another tip is that while you're sewing, you can be winding your bobbin. You're going to need a way to hold 2 spools of thread. So that's one of the main reasons why machines that are single needle like this come with a 2-thread stand. So whenever I buy thread anymore, I always buy at least 2 spools just for this advantage. Get your thread on there. If you're new to a machine or a bobbin winder in particular, there is a setting on here. So you might need to make sure you get that set right so that it clicks off at just the right time. If it's not set right, it could overload the bobbin or underload it. And there's an adjustment right here. You just run this screw in or out. So this is handy for several reasons. One is you don't have to unthread your needle. You don't need to remove your work. You can use this technique on a home machine too. You'll just need to get set up some way that you can run 2 spools of thread at the same time. These stands are pretty cheap, and I've mounted them on boards and just set them on the table next to the machine, and that works too. So speaking of threading a needle is a little bit like pushing a rope uphill. What I found that works really good are these needle threaders. So instead of trying to push the thread through the needle, you're pulling the thread through the needle, and it just works out a lot better. So you insert it in such a way so that when you put your thread into that loop, it's going to pull it through in the direction that you want to thread the needle. Just like that. Real handy, real cheap. I'll put a link in the description. When you're sewing your project, you're going to come to a point where you're going to want to make a turn. 90 degree or even more if you're doing, say, a shirt collar point. And what you might experience is that when you get to that corner, you'll get a skipped stitch right in the corner. So I'm going to show you how to turn your work to where you do not get a skip stitch. So we'll just come up to the corner, advance it by hand if you need to, so that when you get to the point where you're going to make your turn, you want to put the machine in the correct position so that when you turn the work, you don't spoil the stitch. So what you do is you watch that needle, you just move it by hand, and you're going to go to the point where it hits the bottom and just begins to come back up. So that looks like this. All the way down, down, down. Now it's coming back up. At this point, the machine inside has grabbed that thread. It's made the stitch, and so when you manipulate the work like this, it won't spoil it. If you move your work before you get to that point, sometimes it can throw off that thread enough to where the hook will miss it. But now that we've done it at the right time, we won't have a skip stitch. So it'll always be right in that corner, just like you want it. Okay, so that brings me to my last tip. It's kind of related to the one I just told you about turning and getting the machine in the correct position to remove our work from the machine. So we have to make sure that the machine is in the correct position. So just to illustrate the point, obviously if the needle is in the fabric, I can't remove it because the machine's not in the right position. But that's just the part that you can see. There's also parts that you can't see, but they still need to be in the correct position so that the thread will come out. So there's two things you can look at. One is the needle and one is the take-up lever. What I like to do is watch the take-up lever. And so I'll just continue to advance the machine till that's at the top. At that point, we know we can just pull our work out. Thanks a lot. I hope you found something there that you can use. Here's the link for 5 more tips by thejasonofalltrades. If you see something you like, give it a thumbs up and always consider subscribing.